Welcome, everybody. Good morning. Thank you so much for jumping on a Thursday morning Zoom with us. My name is Cassie Greer. I'm an independent creative producer and theater maker based in Portland. I have the honor of serving on the board of directors of the Cultural Advocacy Coalition, and I also chair the committee that plans Advocacy Day. So it is in that capacity that I am coming to you to welcome you this morning and thank you for being in this space with us. So the legislature in just a little over a week is about to jump into their short session for 2024, and we have an Advocacy Day planned for Tuesday, February 20th. And the reason that we are all here in this room today is to make sure that we are able to maximize our collective impact on that day. So the ask, and you'll hear much more about this over the next hour, but is to give your very vocal support for House Bill 4124. We'll get into many more details about what is contained in that bill. And then we'll talk a lot about the Americans for the Arts, Arts and Economic Prosperity Study 6, which is an incredible resource that we have at our fingertips to help really maximize the impact that we might be able to make with our legislators. So that is what we will be spending the next little bit talking about. I'm joined by some thank you, Alex. The Senate version is Senate Bill 1582. Thank you for that. So there's a companion bill in the Senate, and I had not known what the number was. So thank you. So our advocacy is for these two bills. And I'm joined this morning by Samantha Seiner-Opie, who's a senior associate at Oxley and Associates and works very closely with CACO and our lobbying efforts on the state level, and is exceptionally knowledgeable and will give you many more details about what is contained in these bills and our specific asks. And then we'll turn it over to Mario Mesquita, who's the manager of advocacy and engagement for the Regional Arts and Culture Council, and will get us a ton of information that we can use regarding AEP 6, and then we'll have some time for some questions and answers. But first, I'd like to throw it over to Representative Rob Noce. Thank you, Representative, for joining us this morning. If you don't know Representative Noce, he has championed the Arts and Culture Caucus, really spearheaded that effort, and is leading that effort for this House Bill 4124, and is just here to help welcome us and give us a little bit of context for what's going on in this short session and where we fit into that. So over to you.
All right. Samantha, are you here? I'll try not to take away whatever you might share with them. Hello, everyone. Welcome. Thanks for being here. I think the main, first of all, if you haven't already started reaching out to your sort of local rep or senator about our bill, you should start that immediately. And we have bill numbers. And so though I don't know that I know the Senate bill number, but the House bill number is House Bill 4124. And Cassie and Samantha will sort of go through the details of the three various parts of it, but it's capital construction asks, it's operational support asks for the 7 anchors, and then it's a Business Oregon grant fund for other entities around our state who might also need support but are not one of the big 7, basically. A similar process that we ran, I think, back in 2020, right, Brian? Yes, okay, I'm seeing him nod. And we think was successful and worked well. The main thing to know is this, okay? We will get a revenue forecast on February, I want to say the 7th. Hopefully that forecast says there's even a little bit more money than we're currently projecting to have. So when the session gets done, which was, I don't know, like June 30th, let's say, the budget was set. And then over the summer and fall, we monitor tax revenue and how is it coming in or not coming in to make sure we're on track. And so far, we've had good news. We have over $750 more million in lottery and income tax funds collected than we thought we would have. So we have more money than we anticipated. So we're going into the session assuming the revenue forecast holds on February 7th with additional resources. our bill is asking to grab 27 million of that additional resource to fund the things that are in our bill. And I'm sure this is no surprise to most of you, but lots of other people have ideas about how to spend $750 million, okay? Including the governor, including me, so we're competing, and I think we can compete well, but competing well means we have to have a proper drumbeat and a lot of advocacy, okay? Like it's repetition, 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 repetition. Constantly keep talking about this. As I like to say, be a gentle nag. So, and then the other thing you should just know that, like, I think our issues are bipartisan, our sector is cared about, okay? But we're not housing and homelessness, and we're not addiction and criminal justice and community safety. And those are the two big dominating issues that will dominate the 5 weeks of the February short session. So that's kind of what we're punching up against. Sam, I mean, I'm sure you have other things, but like those seem to be like the main things, right?
Yeah, I think that's a really helpful overview.
My bill, will be up at 1 p.m. on February 8th. And the chair has said she doesn't have a packed agenda, but she still wants us to keep it kind of tight.
And I think part of that is because if you haven't seen it already, the CACO worked with Representative Nose and Americans for the Arts on a panel earlier in January that was a little bit of a deeper dive into not only the AEP6 study results, which will be the foundation for, like Cassie mentioned, a huge and helpful tool that will support our advocacy. And then we also had some representatives from the sector speak to what is happening on the ground. So the committee is already primed and, aware of our issues.
It's a pretty friendly committee for us too.
Yeah.
Fantastic. Thank
Okay.
you
Hey,
so much.
Cassie, before I have to jump off, I can take a quick question or two if anybody's got one.
Totally. Derek in the chat is asking if there's a link to the draft text of HB 4124.
There might be on OLIS, right, Sam? Like from the committee from Ledge Days?
Yeah, I'll send that LC. We
Okay.
haven't, the bills haven't technically been published, although we
Not till
have the
February
OMR.
2nd.
Yeah, and so those will be coming, and as soon as we have like the hard copy of it, we'll share it with you. But we do have the LC draft, which just doesn't have that bill number, but it has the language verbatim. We'll see when the bill is published.
Great. And I've got a one sheet from CACO that we've prepared on this bill that I'll drop in the chat as soon as I can multitask appropriately here. But that'll give you a little bit of an overview on what that is all about.
Okay.
Great. Thank you so much, Representative.
All right. Yep. I'm happy to do this.
We appreciate you.
Okay. We're going to make it happen. Just 5 weeks. We can work really hard for 5 weeks.
It's a sprint.
That's right. Okay. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, Representative.
Keep in touch.
Thank you. Sam, I'm gonna kick it over to you. I feel like that's a great introduction for what you have to share with us.
Yeah, perfect. Thank you, Cassie, and great to see everyone's faces this morning. We're very excited to get session underway and to have all of your support as we do so. I will just start with what the contents of the bill are and sort of our strategy, because as you can tell, there are two companion bills for those of you who may be less familiar with the legislative process. That just means we have a bill that is running in the Senate side, a bill that is running in the House. They're the exact same language. There's no changes, but it gives us additional platforms to have those conversations and to make sure that we're educating legislators who, are one, very busy, but also going to be operating at a breakneck pace too, as they move through the 35-day short session. So I'll just start with House Bill 4124 and its contents. So as you all know, the CACO every biennia brings forward a CREF slate that has historically been funded in its entirety by the legislature for the last several biennia. In a sort of unprecedented manner, the legislature funded 2 of the 16 projects last session. And so this session, we are seeking to fund the remaining 14 projects. In total, those asks are 7.8 million, and these projects are, diverse in their size, diverse in their geography. And I know that there has been an incredible amount of work that has gone into making sure these projects are ready to go through a pretty rigorous peer-reviewed selection process that the CACO runs in accordance with the OAC and the OCT. And so that will be included in the first part of the bill. And then as Representative Nose also alluded to, the second half of the bill is really what we're kind of going to be terming resiliency funding for the sector. This is sort of a pivot from what we had previously been coining recovery funding. And I think part of the reason for that semantic change is recovery funding has just really become tired. And so I think this is a more positive way to spin it. And what is included in there in terms of the funding ask is about $19 million in total for the sector. There is just over a $5 million direct allocations that will go to the anchor arts organizations. We've seen that worked really well through the CARES process a couple of years ago. And then the rest of the funding, roughly $14 million, will be available to the remainder of the sector through a grant program that Business Oregon will administer, very similar again to that CARES process. And it's important to note, last session there was some funding that live venue organizations received. In that grant program that I mentioned, if they were a venue had received funding last session, they would not be eligible to apply through this grant program. So that's just something important to note. We wanted to make sure that the money got spread around as equitably as possible. And if an organization had received funding last session while others hadn't, we wanted to make sure other people had the opportunity to access that before them. So the Senate bill will be entirely the same. Alex from Representative Nose's office dropped the bill number in the chat. It's Senate Bill 1582. So keep an eye out for that. As Representative Nose mentioned, we will have our first hearing on our House bill on February 8th. That's the first week of session. And Representative Bynum's Economic Development and Small Business Committee. Some things that you guys can do ahead of that. We will have some folks testifying, but if you have the bandwidth, it's incredibly helpful for us to have letters of support on the record. And so that's something that folks can work on. If you're a CREF project, you can speak to your inclusion in that slate and the importance of funding for capital funding for these types of projects to increase programming in communities, access to the arts for folks. If you're not a CREF project, there's so many other great things in the bill. Obviously, you can speak, in particular to the resiliency funding and the need that the sector is experiencing. It's incredibly helpful to speak from your own organization's experience, and we found that can be most impactful sharing whatever it is you're comfortable sharing. If you've had to cut back on programming as a cost saving measure due to the unfortunate realities on the ground, we want that sort of messaging to come forward in those letters of support to really highlight the need for this type of resiliency funding. So if you're able to, we would highly encourage you all to work on those. And then I guess I'll pause right there really quick to see if anyone has questions on the content of the bill.
Derek, go for it.
Hi, I'm Derek Olson with World Oregon. Relatively new to working with this, and it's interesting to hear. 2 questions. One is, do you have a template that you could maybe share around or post in your e-newsletter or something about like who this would go to and any of the language, so that we're all not sort of winging it, and then we can each put in our own, if something language specific to organizations, that would be super helpful. And then secondly, yeah, if you do have something that would have the draft text that you can share around later, that would be great to see, because I think for many of us who are not part of the Capitol, it's all about the resiliency fund.
Yeah, I won't speak for Cassie or the other CACO team, but I'm sure that that those will be some materials we can definitely follow up with.
Yes. Thanks, Derek. We'll follow up this meeting with an email to everyone who attended, and we'll include a link to this, and we'll also include some template language that you can use. And I just dropped in the chat, if you are unaware of who your legislators are, there's a really quick and easy lookup so you can find exactly who you're trying to target for your specific region, as well as all the rest of the folks. Ruben has a question in the chat. While the bill is up at 1 p.m. on the 8th, are we allowed to be on the legislative floor?
So it won't actually be on what we consider like the House floor. It will be in a committee. And so if you're physically in the building, you are more than welcome to be in that committee room. I can make sure. I don't know what room that committee will be meeting in, but there's only so many different options. So you can participate in person that way just by sitting in the room and listening. If you're not able to participate in person, you can also listen virtually. Oregon's legislative information site, or what we kind of fondly call OLIS, has like the meeting being recorded in real time. So you can watch the panelists presenting or the testifiers presenting, and then the questions that are coming from members who serve on the committee. So we can make sure that folks have all of that information ahead of time if you would like to be engaged in those ways.
Myself and another of our staff will both head down to Salem.
Perfect. Well, yeah, we'll look forward to seeing you there. Our team will be there, so I'll keep an eye out, and please say hello.
Sam, I've got another question from the chat about the eligibility requirements for the 14 million in grants. Would this be for any particular institutions, any particular criteria, or can you speak a little more to the specifics of that?
Yeah, so it'll be for folks who are, and I forget the language, but who are considered an arts and cultural institution. I believe there's some criteria that we have from like OAC or OCT in there. But beyond that, like if you're meeting the mission of providing arts and culture to the community, then you would be eligible. And I'll drop the actual language in the chat here when I have a few minutes so folks can see, but you'll also be able to see that in the bill. We're incredibly intentional in making sure that this would be broad enough to encapsulate any of the folks who, for instance, are CACO members or doing this type of work within their community. And I know in the past there had maybe been some challenges around museum eligibility. We took great pains to make sure that that was spelled out very clearly in this bill language as well.
Thank you, Sam. And then I'll just uplift Mario from the chat. Is there still a need for some of us to volunteer to meet with legislators on the 20th, or are those positions covered? And I will just say yes, on or before the 20th. And Sam, if you have anything to add, or why the 20th was the date that we selected.
Yeah. So February 20th will be our official advocacy day, but as Cassie mentioned, we would encourage you all to begin outreach to your legislators if you haven't already done so now. As Rep. Nose mentioned, it's really helpful to have a continuous drumbeat of this ask being put in all of the legislators' ears. That's obviously my job and my team's job being in Salem, but folks get tired of hearing from us, and they love to hear from folks who are their constituents, living and operating in their district. So I think some things that to take away from this meeting is yes, please do begin outreach to your legislators. And if you plan on participating in our advocacy day on the 20th in person or even virtually, you can begin to request those meetings of legislators now. Because it's such a short session, folks' calendars fill up very quickly. And so you can let them know you're X organization participating in the Cultural Advocacy Coalition's Advocacy Day on the 20th, and you'd like to meet with them, on that day if possible. Many offices, if you're not able to be there in person, are taking Zoom meetings. And so that is a possibility. It's less important that it happens on the 20th in that instance, and just more important that you have that conversation with folks. Some things to be aware of as you guys are scheduling or having those meetings. Sometimes you may not be able to meet with the legislator themselves, whether that's because of a last minute change, they got pulled into a caucus meeting or something like that. That is totally okay. It's just as impactful to have that conversation with a member of their team who is often providing that legislator, with all of the information they need on a very regular basis. And I think, I'm not sure if we'll get more into this, but there'll be some advocacy materials we'll arm you all with that you can share with those offices so that, you're not going in with nothing. They'll provide a really helpful sort of roadmap for how we're talking about this issue, what's in the bill. But then I would just kind of double down on the importance of really sharing your organization's experience. That's what folks really love to hear and what will set your meeting apart from, for instance, a meeting I'm having with them. And then as you guys are concluding, it's always totally within the right to ask for, their contact information. If you didn't already had it, everyone has cards that they can hand out. You can follow up via email with anything that you would want to send afterwards, and also thank the office for their time in meeting with you. Those are some just general best practices. And the other thing I would flag, just to be mindful of, it's totally the norm for us, but for some who aren't familiar with the legislative process, it can seem a bit short. Most legislative meetings are only 15 minutes, and sometimes our meetings are as short as 5 minutes when we're walking a legislator, back from a committee room to their office. So don't expect, a half-hour meeting or anything like that. It's usually 15 minutes is very standard. I think that maybe kind of covers the 20th and what to expect or leading up to it.
That's incredibly helpful. Thank you, Sam. Catherine's got a hand up. Go for it, Catherine.
Yes, thank you. Sam and Cassie, I want to make sure on something that we all know, because I realize doing a lot of things in advance really helps. So the House bill is going to be unveiled on February the 8th at what? The Economic Development and Small Business Committee, right? Okay, and so reaching out to those committee members in advance about it, is very good. Now, what committee is the Senate bill going to be revealed to, so that we can also reach out to that committee?
Yeah, that's a really excellent question, Catherine. We're working to get that scheduled and figure out where that one will go. So we'll let you know as we have that finalized.
Oh, okay.
So yeah, it hasn't been finalized yet.
Got it. So once it is, all of us will know, and then we zoom in on, that Senate committee who's doing that bill. Thank you.
Thank you, Catherine and Sam. One more question from the chat that I'm going to uplift right now, and then we'll move forward, but we will have more time for questions after we hear from Mario. But assuming the bills pass, when are the funds available? And it sounds like, Richard and Karen, you're a CREF project that is shovel ready. Do you have any word on that, Sam?
Yeah, Brian, you actually may be better equipped to answer this than we would, but it's my understanding that this funding would still put the CREF projects on the I guess normal cycle for when they would receive funding, even though we would get it beginning at this session.
Yes, correct. If they do turn out to be lottery bonds. Oh, well, good morning, everyone. Good to see you all. Brian Rogers here, Executive Director of the Oregon Arts Commission, Oregon Cultural Trust. If they are lottery bonds, the bonds are not sold until the end of the biennium. So that would mean 2025 spring, probably April of 2025, if they're bonds. If they're lottery funds or general fund, they're available as soon as the bill passes. And there's a process. I'll do the intake with any CREF projects and basically hand you off to a Business Oregon regional project manager who will manage the invoicing and the contracting and project management.
Ours is a $350,000 ask. It's already been reviewed and approved by the city, and we have complete plans. We're ready to put it out to a contractor. So that's why I asked the question.
Yeah, no, it's a good question. Timing is very important in construction projects. What's the title of your project?
It's the Very Little Theater, and it's phase 2 of our 3-phase remodel. This portion of it is to extend the scene shop so that we can build more scenery in the shop rather than on stage and have more things on stage.
Yes, I'm familiar with the project. Yes. If the bill gets passed, fingers crossed, hopefully there'll be more communication from us at the Arts Commission, Cultural Trust, Business Oregon about timing and what's required.
Thank you.
Thanks for jumping in, Brian, with your
Absolutely.
appreciate you. Derek, you want to go for it?
Yeah, quick question. So if this was passed as it's drafted, it would be Business Oregon and not the Cultural Trust who would be managing the dollars for I'm talking about the non-capital construction, the sort of resiliency funds.
You want me to jump in? The Arts Commission and the Cultural Trust are housed in Business Oregon, so we are Business Oregon, and the Arts Commission and Cultural Trust would manage those funds that would be that you would apply for.
So I know that. I used to work for Business Oregon. What I'm saying is you were talking about a Business Oregon. So is it the Cultural Trust staff or the Business Oregon Trust staff who would be managing like the grant application and the disbursement of funds and all that? Because those are different folks.
The staff is fairly well blended between the Arts Commission and Cultural Trust. We're housed together, kind of like sister, quote unquote, sister agencies. So I would be the lead along with Leo Responco, who's in this chat or in this meeting as well. We would develop.
So it would not be then other Business Oregon staff. It would be the Cultural Trust and the commission that would be handling.
Well, again, we are blended. They would do our fiscal office in Business Oregon would do in our contract department, everybody would be involved in it at some level. We're a team, all of us.
Okay, yeah, okay, all right. But the actual folks doing the more in-depth stuff would be the Cultural Trust and the Arts Commission folks, not like the regional Business Oregon folks in the different parts of the state.
Correct, that's right.
Okay. That's very helpful. Thank you for the clarification.
Program management would be managed by us at the Arts Commission Culture Trust.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Yep.
Yeah, just to put a finer point on that for folks. So Brian and Leora would essentially be the liaisons. You guys would be most likely interfacing with at any given point as an organization.
Great to clarify. Carol has a hand up.
Yeah, I just wanted to thank you everybody for putting this together. I have a question about the 20th. In the past, when I've gone to legislative advocacy days, there's sort of a donuts and coffee session beforehand, and then I've been handed my appointments. But you're saying we should make our appointments ourselves beforehand, and then do we let you know when our appointments are? So I just want to not be double booking or things
Yeah.
like that.
That's a great question. Because this is a short session, we usually do those sort of larger, more elaborate advocacy days, not in short session years. So this is very fast and furious, and as much impact as we can have. But yes, the ask on CACO membership and artists and arts leaders is please, yes, set up your own meetings. If you want to keep us posted with how those have gone, or other ways that we can help support you in your messaging and in your asks, absolutely be in touch. Otherwise, the goal is for as many of us to be connected with as many of our elected officials as we possibly can. And CACO is happy to support in that, but we're not needing at this moment a report back on when you're scheduled and what you talked about and all of that. Does that answer your question? Great. Cool. Okay, and then I'm going to go one last question from Teresa before I throw it over to Mario. Sorry to keep you in suspense, Mario. But when will we know whether the CREF projects are funded by lottery bonds or general fund?
Yeah, so that will happen really right at the end of session. So typically we'll see, there's without getting too far into the weeds, there's a high likelihood that our asks get folded into like the end of session funding bill. And so that usually comes out in an amendment form like a day or two before the legislature adjourns. And so we would then see it there officially. By kind of rule of thumb, what we have heard from the Legislative Fiscal Office is if you are a project under $2 million, they don't really like to bond that size. And so it's likely if you're less than $2 million that you would be receiving general fund versus lottery bonds funding. Although that could be subject to change. And I mean, I think we keep all of our options open. We're agnostic as to how the funding gets to us, just as long as we get the funding.
Great. Thank you so much, Sam. And let's segue over to we're asking for these things, and then what is the best way that we can use our messaging to reach our representatives? Mario, are you ready to go?
Sure.
Okay. I'm gonna start this slideshow. Does that work for you?
Yeah, that definitely works. So I'm Mario Mesquita, Manager of Advocacy and Engagement here at the Regional Arts and Culture Council in Portland. And I was also the lead partnering up with Americans for the Arts to give the AEP6 survey within Multnomah County. With that said, this is the perfect segue into kind of talking about how can we use some of these numbers in our advocacy efforts. And a mantra that you will be hearing over and over again is that there's no story without numbers, and there's no numbers without a story. And at least the information and data points that were collected through AEP6, we can distinctly use in our messaging. There are data points for our state of Oregon, and then there are 19 communities that participated on a more local level that you all can also tap into. In fact, there might be some of the leads also in this room, but also you all might have already sat through a conversation last Friday that the Oregon Arts Commission also held about AEP6. So I think this is just reiterating everything that we already know, that it is important to have some of these numbers in the back of our pocket to use as points of proof. The reason why the arts and culture are very important, that it is a big industry, and they also need to be funded as well. I guess next slide will be an introduction by Randy Cohen. It's a short video, so we'll watch that in the meantime.
Think of all the industries that have already been touched related to this one afternoon. Randy and his wife finally get out of the house and they go to a museum. It started earlier in the week when we went online and checked out the museum's websites. Your organizations, arts and culture organizations, we have websites. that means we employ web designers and programmers and writers and photographers to put content on there. We bought our tickets there online. So now you got the e-commerce and the finance people. They're getting some of the action on that. And we drove downtown. We didn't have to drive too far. We didn't have to spend a lot on gas, but $10 at that parking garage. I can tell you during the week, that parking garage, forget it. You can't get a space. On the weekend, there's nothing going on down that part of town. If it wasn't for those arts organizations, museums, performing arts organizations, they'd probably just be closed. But we were there. That $10, the clerk that gave me that stub, that's a job. The people who own and manage that parking garage, those are companies, those are businesses. And then it was off to the restaurant, $70. Some of those dollars are going to the local growers and producers of the food. Everything happens within 50 miles. The waiter who waited on us, that's some personal income. The owner of the restaurant, that's some entrepreneurial income. So there's all of that activity there. And then we walked to the museum. And as you can get, by the time we got to the museum, this was like the cheapest part of the whole day. Now all of a sudden we're really spending money at the museum because all these other industries have already been touched. And we went in. That air conditioning in the middle of summer in Washington, D.C., I can't imagine what their utility bill is. But right now they're trying to heat that place. In the summer, they're trying to cool that place. Arts organizations have all those kinds of bills and expenses, like all businesses and facilities, and they employ more than just the curators and the artists there. People, if they think about the arts as an industry when they're at an arts event, they're like, oh, I bet those musicians are getting paid, or maybe that's a great set. I bet they got a set designer. Well, we also employ accountants and auditors, electricians and plumbers and security and marketing and box office people. We employ a whole range of industries in our community, and people don't think of that. So that's the experience. That whole experience right there is what we're capturing with Arts and Economic Prosperity 6. It's the economic impact study of nonprofit arts and culture organizations and the event-related spending by their audiences.
Thank you. If you don't know, Randy Cohen is the Vice President of Research for Americans for the Arts. And he had a whirlwind of a tour here in Oregon back in November, in which he shared these big numbers about Oregon, that in 2022, we spent $829 million, which included organizations and also audiences, which also created around $13,000, not dollars, but 13,000 jobs, and included $560 million in personal income to residents. And then, of course, $155 million in local, state, and federal government revenues. These are important numbers that we can also plug, even in this initial ask to meet with legislators, of why it's important to talk to us. And to give any average money spent per person per event, we can also plug the number of around $40 that each person spent here in the state of Oregon. Those are averages. So if you go to the next slide, what we were able to do, these are just important numbers, and because I was Multnomah County, I had created this slide for Randy's presentation for the city of Portland with the help of some of my local county partners as well, where we just highlighted some of those very important numbers, whether it be the expenditures for the total industry, between organizations and audiences, revenue, both local, state, and federal, along with participation rates that we had in each of our areas as well. So this is just a small snippet of what I was able to gather in my area. But if we go to the next slide, this is an example of the summary of the state of Oregon. Now, each of the 19 communities that participated actually have these summaries that are already produced. They are housed both on the AFTA website, but also at the Oregon Arts Commission, which Leora and Cassie have now shared in in the chat that you can check out. Here, it gives a little bit more detail and breakdown of some of the numbers, whether they be revenue or expenditures, but also on a more like local level of just one person. For example, like Randy was saying, how much money you spent either on a babysitter, on travel, on restaurant, what have you. It gives you a breakdown of general how much each person, excuse me, still the morning, had spent as well. So if we move on to the next slide, if you are also coming from an organization where you want to see how much you have impacted your local area, you can always check out the AEP's 6 calculator. And this is a calculator that AFTA had created to give each organization at least some estimated power on how much impact that they have in their area. Cassie did include that in the link in the chat, and I would definitely encourage you, if you did not participate in the AEP6 organizational survey, to go ahead and give this a look at and see what kind of numbers actually you're able to produce from your own local level. And with that, we have another mini outro from Randy.
But we got a job to do. We've got to be relentless in our messaging. We've got to build the habit of advocacy every month, or more often. It could be every week. We've got to do a little something. We've got to write a letter to our elected reps. We've got to go testify at our city and county and state hearings. We got to get other people to tell this story. So just real quick, because I don't want you to leave without, some marching orders. How do you claim your impact? And this is for economic impact, but this is for all the ways you benefit the community and the state. 3 questions. What's the message? Who gets the message? Who delivers the message? You don't need to go to get the big book of advocacy or the whole library book on lobbying or anything. Just think of these 3 questions. What's the message? Well, we've talked about some today, right? Jobs, the economy, tourism, and driving tourism, community unity, and there's so many more. Health, education. We've got a lot of messages. Who gets the message? This is where we start to do some of our research, right? It's like, who are those decision makers in our environment? Is it a state economic committee? Is it as private funders, the trustees? Someone's making decisions that affect us. Who are they, and what do they care about? And then when we go talk to them, I mean, we need a quiver full of case-making arrows, and so like, oh, this is the education person, whoosh, bang, we're going to get them, but, or they care about, the economy. So be ready to talk about all of it. And then who delivers the message? So, when they run me up to Capitol Hill to do, congressional member briefings and staff briefings, everybody knows why I'm there. I mean, they see me coming a mile away. Guys cover up their wallets, ladies lock their purse in the drawer. But when we can bring a business leader, a school superintendent, an artist, a military officer talking about the benefits of the arts, it strengthens our story. We had an event once where the mayor of Mesa, Arizona, I'm all about Arizona and Oregon, say, what has moved me? With mayor of Mesa, Arizona was telling a story. It was budget hearing night for the arts. And so the city council was there. It was the mayor of the city council. And he said, the chief of police was there, which wasn't that unusual, city council meeting, but he was in full chief of police regalia, hat, tie, medals. He said that was a little different. And after everybody else had testified, he asked for 3 minutes. And he basically said, if you got to take a cut out of the arts budget, I'd rather you just took it out of my public safety budget. Because when they do their job well, it makes my job easier. Can you imagine if we had 1,000 police chiefs on that message, right? So, so who delivers the message? And lastly, my golden rule of advocacy: no story without a number, no number without a story. We need all of that, right? So we got lots of numbers today, but tell your story. Talk about all the people you employ in the community, or your printing and your utility bill, or if you're an attendee, the money you spent, last time at the arts. Everything you do to advance the arts is important, and you're important for doing it. But we got a job to do. We've got to be relentless in our messaging.
I clearly don't know how to work my PowerPoint.
Just to answer some of those questions, I think Catherine actually had pointed out or asked the question, who should we be targeting? And so I think it was exactly that. Apart from our local legislators, policymakers, that we want to make sure that they also support and push above, to make sure that we at least send letters, send communication to staffers in hopes that we can get the message across to the Senate committee, but also House committees as well.
Thank you so much, Mario. We'll open to any questions anyone has about the data, the numbers, AAP6. Mario and I are also working on that beautiful slide that he prepared for the city of Portland. We're in the process of creating a similar image for each of the 19 little localities, and we'll be working to get those on the CACO website under our resources tab. I'm going to say by Monday. Does that sound reasonable for us, Mario? Great. So we'll share a link to that as well, so you can. It's a little bit more visually friendly than wading through the summary documents that are linked to on the Business Oregon OAC page. But any questions that you have about AAP6 or further questions that you have about HB 4124 or the partner bill in the Senate, we're happy to chat more about those. Catherine, go for it.
I'm sorry, I'm just always full of questions. So for a minute, I want to play the devil's advocate. So, you know, Mario, Cassie, Sam, etc. We know how exciting the numbers are on AEP6, and I was very heavily involved with AEP5 a number of years ago when I was the executive director of the Oregon Coast Council for the Arts, now retired. My question as I think about this is, the AEP6 has such wonderful information about the efficacy of the arts and how great they are, etc. Are there going to be some legislators that think, hey, things are going okay here in Oregon for the arts. Why should I vote and support House Bill, blah, 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 or Senate Bill, whatever the number is, I've forgotten now. I don't know. Can we talk about that a little bit so we're not caught off guard? I mean, okay, folks, why are you asking for more money? Look at all these good results in AEP6. Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Catherine. Always appreciate the devil's advocate. I'll jump in there first, just to point out that these numbers are great, but what the numbers are really reflecting is the dramatic economic impact that the arts and culture sector has. And another data point that's useful to know is that Oregon ranks, I think, 41st in arts funding in the country. So despite the fact that our sector generates more economic stuff than like transportation or agriculture, we are significantly low on the amount that our government is putting back into our sector. And I'm going to let Brian talk more about this, because this is Brian's life's work right now.
Along with Leora and our chair of the Arts Commission's Suba. One of the things that, you know, Catherine, you can respond to that is government revenue in Oregon from tax revenue is $155 million back to government from arts and cultural organizations, $155 million. If you scrape together all the government support from the state, from local, city, county, etc., you're probably talking about 20 million. This is an extremely high return of investment. You invest in arts and culture, it not only makes your community better and stronger and more viable, but it also supports government. And you know, to Randy's point in that video, the police officer story is about somebody recognizing the impact of arts and cultural organizations, making people's lives better. It's not just about the money. It's also about making people's lives better. And I also be remiss if I didn't recognize that Leora Spanko, our senior grants manager at the Arts Commission, did a tremendous job in making sure that there were 19 communities across Oregon that participated in this survey. It's a lot of work. You know, the last time we did this, there was 11. The previous time before that, 10 years ago, there was 2, Eugene and Portland. And also, we are very, very proud to partner with Travel Oregon. They subsidize many of the communities. We would never have been able to do 19 communities without Travel Oregon. They recognize that the economic impact of having people travel outside of their communities to go to other communities to participate in arts and culture is a really important part of the economic fabric of the state. So thank you, Travel Oregon. I don't think anybody is here representing Travel Oregon today, but we really, really appreciate the partnership. Sorry, I'll get off my soapbox now. Thank you.
No, it's a good soapbox. Thank you for being here and being on it. And it's really, I think, useful for all of us to know the incredible work that has happened up to this moment. And this is our opportunity to sort of stand on the shoulders of that, or take that stick and run, or whatever metaphor you want to use. But there are so many people, so many agencies in our state that have really worked to get us this far. Got about 7 minutes left of this hour. Any other questions? Any other things you'd like to hear more about? Nicole, go for it.
Good morning, everyone. I had a question for Sam, really. I think about just the process on the Senate side, since I'm heard that the sponsor is going to be Senator Frederick. Is that correct? Okay.
Yeah, that is correct.
So even though we don't know exactly when it's scheduled, do you have a sense of what committee? Because from a statewide perspective, I have a platform of being able to ask people specifically to go to their constituencies, but I want to sort of target at least this first round of awareness building around the committees that will hear it first. Do you have a likely committee it will go through on the Senate side?
Yeah, I could see it going through a labor and business potentially. The Senate side has fewer committees, and it doesn't necessarily have an economic development committee where it would like fit neatly in there in the past. Some of our other bills have like moved through the Veterans Emergency Management Federal and World Affairs Committee, which like the Federal and World Affairs is kind of a little bit of a catch-all, but we don't necessarily have a great sense. I think we'll be working with Senator Frederick to see where, he would like to see it go to some degree, and then it'll be up to the Senate president, but Senator Frederick can have some influence in that as well.
And then just for longer term, well, not longer term, for our 6-week sprint, eventually it will go to Ways and Means at the end. So if there are people, is it helpful right now even to say that if your legislator is a Ways and Means committee member, to make sure that they are hearing the drumbeat as well now, or wait until a little closer to where it's meaningful in terms of budget decisions?
Yeah, I would actually wait until we're a little closer to the budgetary process. So by way of kind of how these bills will move through, and it could be likely we see the House bill move, for instance, and the Senate bill doesn't, because they know the House bill is going to move to Ways and Means, and they don't need to have duplicates in there. After our hearing on the first week, we will have the bill scheduled for what's called a work session, where the committee then votes on it. And our hope is that the committee votes in favor, and the bill would then go in the second week, essentially, to Ways and Means, where it would sit then essentially for the rest of session. And so once it gets to Ways and Means, we will have several weeks to begin advocating with those members. And I think that would be a more logical point, because if you have those conversations too early, folks, they ask you, where is the bill at? And so once it's in Ways and Means, that gives us kind of the footing to say, oh, it's going to be in your committee, or we hope it'll get referred to your subcommittee, that sort of thing.
Thank you so much. That really helps.
Of course.
Thanks for that question, Nicole. Ruben is asking in the chat about some language around making people's lives better. For example, how do we imagine a positive future without strong creative muscles? Which I think is, yes, that's the heart part of the message. And we've talked a lot about the brain, the numbers part of the message. I will point out that on the summary study findings from AEP6 on the second page of all of those little local breakdowns are some levels of agreement with social impact statements. So, for example, I'm looking just at the state of Oregon summary, and 82.5% of people surveyed said this venue or facility is an important pillar for me within my community. Or the other questions or statements are, I would feel a great sense of loss if this activity or venue were no longer available. This is inspiring a sense of pride in this neighborhood or community, and my attendance is a way of entrusting that this activity or venue is preserved for future generations. So that's a way to sort of look at the making people's lives better, along with the numbers of support that has. But I think that's where we're all able to speak in our own specific ways to stories of community members encountering our organizations or our work, and how that has made an impact for those specific individuals, and just in general the social and emotional well-being of people, as we're all living in this world that is working on continued recovery from 2020 and beyond, and dealing with a whole host of other social challenges. So telling your own individual story about how you have observed the arts having positive impact. That's just my 2 cents. If anyone else would like to weigh in, I mean, this is, about our collective work. And if not, I am happy to leave it there. So thank you again for spending your 9 o'clock hour with us this morning. Be on the lookout early next week for an email that will have the recording of this meeting, along with a bunch of the links that we've shared in the chat, and some additional resources. Mark your calendars for February 20th. Get meetings set up with your elected officials, and help all of us in getting these bills passed this short session. Thanks, everyone. Thanks to Sam and Mario and Brian and Leora and everyone else who has made this possible. Take care.